Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So today I'm going to be talking about how to cross contour hands. And the first thing that I'm showing you here is just how to make your drawing, even if it's just a regular graphite line drawing, a little bit more 3D. Just by darkening up some of the lines like into the crevices, it'll make um, a more realistic effect than if you just have the same line variation throughout your entire line drawing. So that's the first thing. So you can kind of get started with a line drawing and already have it be more three-dimensional. So the second thing is that if you're someone who's still struggling with, say, like proportions and just having an accurate line drawing, I have a couple other videos on how to draw proportions and measure and do things like that. So I'll link that in the description. So check those out if that's something that you are still struggling with. But here we're going to get into cross contour. So first of all, what are cross contour lines and what's the point of it? So the point of cross contour lines is that they're sort of like imaginary lines that you can put over your form, your object, to make it look more 3D. So the first question people sometimes have is, okay, but why would I want to do that? And the reason you would do this is that it's a technique to learn that kind of is like, think of it as like a prelude to other forms of drawing, like cross hatching, which looks more finished usually. And it gives you some better understanding of how to actually map out that form to be more 3D. So the reason I think that it's very important is that a lot of times when people start cross hatching, they just sort of like put lines down, right? And they might observe the shadows, but they're not really thinking about the direction of line and how the direction of the lines that they use can impact the drawing so much. Okay, so this is sort of the idea behind cross contour lines and why they're so useful. Okay, so when you start, you can really start anywhere in your drawing. And what you want to do is use these lines to mimic the form. So sometimes people wonder, well, how do I know which direction I should put my lines in? And that does take a little bit of trial and error. If you're doing a drawing here, I recommend literally just draw your hand like how I've drawn it and essentially just copy what I've done. And then you'll see how I'm doing it and you can just kind of mimic that in your own drawing. But generally speaking, the way to think about it, like let's say you're drawing a circle and you want to make it look more spherical, you would think about how do you wrap the lines over the form to make it look more 3D, right? So think about as if you're sort of wrapping lines around your object. Now you can look at some objects that actually already have lines in them, like say a can. If you take, an aluminum can, if you take the wrapper off or whatever, just something that you get at the supermarket, you'll see that it has those ridges inside of it. That's a great thing to draw if you're doing cross contour because it already literally has those ridges in it that you can simply follow. And that will help you kind of start to get this conceptual idea behind cross contour. Okay, so that's a couple tips just for that. So the next thing is, how do I make my lines actually more effective when I'm doing cross contour? And I have a couple of tips for you. So the first thing that makes your drawing go from, okay, to really good is notice in this drawing how I'm darkening up the lines towards the crevices. So every time I get towards an edge, notice how my line pressure is a little bit harder and the lines are a little bit darker. So for this, you're going to want to use a softer pencil. So a soft pencil might be like a 4B or a 6B or anything higher than that. And a harder pencil is like 2H. So you would not want to use a 2H for this. An HB, like a regular pencil, like the regular Ticonderoga yellow pencils, those are 2Bs. Those are okay. They're not great. But if you have, a 4B or a 6B, that's the best because it's going to be softer and you're going to be able to get a darker line by using that. So when you're marking, I literally will press harder into those crevices and then I kind of lighten up my touch as I get into the middle of whatever I'm cross contouring. And that gives a better, a more 3D look. The other tip that I have for you for this, in terms of just how you draw your lines, is to think about line placement, right? So how close together and how far apart your lines are. So you'll notice here that my line spacing already, it's not perfectly even, right? So sometimes I have the lines closer together, sometimes I have them a little bit further apart. Now, why am I doing that? So when something gets sort of like going into another area, like where my hands are kind of, I want to show that they're receding into that space and they're kind of going into that sort of like crevice of my palm. I'm making those lines closer together. And when the object is broader, like the shape is just broader in general, like on my knuckle there, I am having the lines be a little bit further apart. So try varying your lines in terms of how close they are or far they are apart. And I think you'll find that that also kind of accentuates the 3D quality that you can get through your lines. And so throughout the drawing, I'm really just going through the drawing, and I'm starting with these cross contour lines, and I'm just sort of like going from part of the drawing to part of the drawing. So here, I'm going through the thumb, and you'll notice, so here my lines are going in a different direction than they went when I was doing the other finger. So notice that. So notice which way the lines are going in different parts of the object. And as you do more of this, it'll get more second nature. So I find that with students, a lot of times at first, it's just kind of, you're kind of thinking like, which line, which direction do I go in? Is this the right kind of line? And as you do this a little bit more, and, I'm going to post a few more, I think, I was thinking throughout November, I'm going to do a few more videos on this technique of cross contour and just sort of make November kind of like a month to focus on hands and different hand drawings. You'll just get more confident. So this is one of those things where like practice is important, like anything. Hands are sort of notoriously difficult. And the reason that hands are just difficult in general is that, there's so much complexity in the human hand, right? There's bones and there's muscles and there's tons of ligaments and tendons. And, your hand is just a complex form. And so, give yourself patience. I think that's really important when you're drawing, not to give up too quickly. Like, give yourself some time just to kind of like get through some of these concepts and just get better. The other thing that I wanted to say about hands is that it's so important to look at those really, really minute details, right? So if you notice here, I'm drawing sort of where my palm is kind of sitting on the table, and they're sort of wrinkly, right? So, it's like your hand is sort of mushed together, and you have these unique little details. And the more you can show that kind of stuff, the better, right? So you want to include details like your nails, your knuckles, maybe like the lines on your knuckles, those hand lines that you have. Those are all important details that you should not omit when you're doing a hand drawing, because if you omit them, it's just not going to look as realistic, right? So if you think of a cartoon and you look at sort of like cartoony hands, they're very flattened out and they're very simplistic. So the more detail that you get, if you're going for a realistic look, right, you want all of those kinds of details. That is what you're going for in this, okay? So as you can see, this going back to this idea of changing the direction, like, it's not just a matter of the fingers, but how do you do the palm, right? So this will show you, really just if you're drawing and you want to just kind of like copy what I'm doing, you'll see exactly how to do it and sort of mimic this in your drawing. And now you'll notice that I just did the thumb fingernail. And whenever you do flat surfaces, that's when you can kind of have a grid. But if you have anything that's not flat, it shouldn't look like grid lines, right? So if it's grid lines, it's not the right thing. If it's a flat surface though, a flat surface you actually can do as grid lines because you want to show that there's no curve to the picture plane, right? So notice that when I did the fingernails, it's different. They have a different look than the other parts of this hand. Okay, so now what you can do is you can add the other direction of your lines, right? So you could think of the first ones that I did as sort of going in one direction, and now you're going in the other direction, not really vertically, they kind of look horizontal here, but going in the other direction. So that's pretty much how to cross contour a hand. Thank you to all my new subscribers. I hit over 700 this week, which was very exciting. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. And thanks for watching.